So we're going to move into the second part of our session today, and this is very much a wonderful and unexpected treat. A week ago, Anna Olson, the head of the Chamber of Commerce, called me up and suggested that we might be interested in talking about the lodging tax during 22 and 21. And it was a great idea, and then the question was figuring out a way to make it work. And what I wanted to do, there were really two things that were really important to me. I greatly admire you, Anna, and I knew that you would come up and bring not just a great degree of thoughtfulness and intelligence and passion, but also just this love you have for the community and doing the right thing. And I wanted to find somebody who shared those qualities. And Jim Stanford was kind enough to come along and volunteer to set up a discussion, a dialogue, a conversation about the lodging tax. It's a very important issue in the sense that it captures a lot of different facets of who we are as a community, the wildness, the commerce. A lot of the tensions are all wrapped up in this. And so the opportunity to have a very thoughtful, civil conversation among two people I admire very much was really, that was an opportunity I couldn't pass up, but it wouldn't be possible without both of you cooperating in the way that you have. So I'm deeply indebted, so thank you very much. And with any luck, not only will this conversation be illuminating for all of us, but it will also set a tone for the political season because, as I mentioned earlier, we are in a period of great rancor, and it doesn't serve us as a body politic very well. And so I thought that by having two very thoughtful and passionate people come and talk about things in a very thoughtful fashion, we could set a really good tone for local politics for this coming year. So with that, I do want to do a couple of quick shout-outs, though, that relate to this. And the first is Jerry Bland. You've served this community very, very well for the last 23 years, and your passion and the effort and the thoughtfulness that you brought to Jackson Hole in general, Teton Village, and the skiing community. Thank you so much for all you've done. Would you please give it up for Jerry? Come on. And the other shout out I wanted to do was Mary Kate Buckley, who has some big shoes to fill, but I know you're going to do it extraordinarily well. So congratulations on the new job, and it's just a great thing. So good on you, mate. So the lodging tax, the handout that you have on your table, on one side is the agenda, and on the other I put some basic facts about the lodging tax. And I'm not going to try to be too repetitive about what's going on there, but the essence of it is that in 2010, the voters of Teton County authorized a 2% lodging tax, and in the calendar year that ended with the December report, it raised about $7 million. Of that $7 million, 60% is authorized, the state requires to be spent on promotion, and through that, and that 60%, the promotional dollars are allocated by the TTB, Travel and Tourism Board. 3 members of that board are here today. All 7 of them wanted to be here, but in a strange coincidence of timing, their annual strategic planning retreat, which they scheduled last July, is actually going on right now. So I'm really indebted to 3 of the 7 members for breaking away for this session. So Alex Klein, the past chair, Keely Heron, the current chair, and Brian Gallagher, the incoming chair, are all here. And if you guys would just stand so that people could see who you are, I'd appreciate it. So the way we're going to handle this session is that first I'm going to, we'll start by taking a look at the promotional video that is the centerpiece of this year's TTB campaign, the Stay Wild video. Many of you have probably seen it. For those of you who haven't, it'll give you a sense of the kind of work that the TTB is doing. Then I'm going to ask our two speakers, Jim and Anna, to come up. Jim is going to start by talking for 10 minutes or so about his thoughts about the lodging tax, and that'll be followed by Anna. And then we'll have a Q&A session, and I'll ask the two speakers to start by asking each other a couple questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. And then at the very end, as we did with the federal land managers, we'll give each of them a chance to just make a quick closing remark. So I'm just going to walk over and get the Stay Wild video going.
In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. Don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You, the people, have the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure.
With that, I'd ask Anna and Jim to come on stage. And we will start with Jim Stanford, who is a town council member, but is speaking on behalf of himself and not the council.
Good afternoon, everyone. First off, I just want to thank Jonathan for bringing all of us together to think about how we can work together collaboratively and foster a culture of stewardship that has been a big part of our heritage since the first people arrived in this valley. As Jonathan said, I'm just here to speak today and offer some perspective as just one guy. I'm not part of any sort of an organized effort regarding this issue, the lodging tax. Our board has not, our council has not taken an official vote on this yet, and I think you'd find a range of diverse opinions among all the town and county elected officials if you were to ask them about the tax. Anna and I agree on much too. There's a potential that the lodging tax could be changed significantly by the legislature this session. Some of those changes I would welcome, and I could actually come around to a point of view of supporting the lodging tax wholeheartedly. But I think for the purposes of today's discussion, we're here to talk about the lodging tax as it's currently structured. And I'm just offering a little perspective as somebody who's been serving in government. I'm in my 6th year serving on the Jackson Town Council. And it comes as no surprise to any of you that the two biggest issues we've been grappling with in our town and in our county are housing and transportation. And we, as local government, are under enormous pressure to try to do something about these problems and make progress. And you heard many of our federal land managers earlier talk about how they're feeling strained. And I can say from the point of view of local government, we feel that way at times too. And it would be unfair to put all of the blame for the increased problems that we have, the crowding, the traffic, the lack of housing. All of these economic forces are not caused by the lodging tax alone. We cannot cite that as the cause of all of this. for me, from my perspective, it's the one piece of the puzzle that we control. And right now, the sticking point is not about collecting lodging tax, but how the revenue is spent. And as Jonathan said, 60% has to be spent on promotion. And that's been the difficult part for us as elected officials to balance, is that on the one hand, we're collecting $1 of revenue. We have to give away 60 cents of that revenue. And what many of us have begun to question is the 60 cents we're spending on promotion, is that making our problems worse so that we have to get more dollars to try to somehow come up with, to build housing and to solve our transportation woes, put it toward alternative transportation, for example. So you have international economic forces at work. You have national marketing. You have state of Wyoming marketing. You have a lot of private businesses doing marketing. The lodging tax is the one piece we control. And as I've said before, we're doing this to ourselves with our own money. As somebody who's in government, we had a couple of years ago, Mayor Flitner convened a housing summit for us to try to work on how, strategies to lay out a better path to build housing. And over again, we were told that the biggest driver of the need for housing was job growth. And job growth alone was kind of overwhelming everything else. Here in the paper, you don't need me to tell you this, but 6 full pages of classified ads, help wanted ads, and here it is mid-January. There's a good chance many of these jobs will not be filled. And so in the last 5 years, we've had annual average job growth of 3.7%. This is from our comp plan indicator report our staff brings to us each year. Housing growth has been 1.1%. So job growth is outpacing housing by a ratio of 3 or 4 to 1. And so it's you have to wonder, are we pumping the bellows and superheating the economy at the same time we're trying to figure out ways to offset the impacts of all that economic growth and all that economic activity. At that housing summit a few years ago, it dawned on me, I just made an observation, that it seemed like we were considering ways to come up with a new tax to offset the impacts of the tax we already have, which is the lodging tax. So as somebody who's tasked with funding the government and trying to pay for all the services that our locals and tourists depend on, we try to figure out what are the best ways to do that. What are the best ways to fund the government? 2 years ago, I advocated for what I thought was a more effective strategy, especially to help us make progress on housing and transportation, and that was for a 6 cent of general revenue, and that was voted down. In fact, I've joked with Anna that given the recent track record, maybe the chamber should be paying me to say no to the lodging tax. It might have the opposite effect of what's intended. So really, there are different ways to approach government funding, and I think a strong sentiment I've heard from the community is, okay, we're willing to consider other ways to fund the government, but we also at the same time have to stop making the problems worse. And you walk downtown and talk with anybody on the street, and they're going to say, this place needs no more promotion. And there's going to be a lot of promotion anyhow. That's the reality of it. Our national parks are international treasures, and people are always going to be drawn here. There's always going to be marketing. And what I've heard is that maybe if we could just turn down the heat a little bit and remove at least the millions that we're spending locally on promotion, it might help. And as I said earlier, when you have to give up 60 cents of every dollar in revenue, and then you might somehow, in a small way, be making your problems worse, that you have to come up with other revenue to offset that, I've begun to consider maybe we should move on from that as a way to fund the local government. And so that's just my perspective. So from a government efficiency standpoint, I'm not sure the lodging tax is the best option for us. Also, it cuts to the heart of the matter, which is our quality of life. And, you don't need me to tell you this, but we've heard for everybody here. We've all experienced it. Trailhead parking lots are overflowing. Boat ramps are overflowing. Every time, people are trying to get away to go camping with friends or family, it's become harder to find a good camping spot, say. And so this is something that I hear from folks, including longtime business owners, very successful business owners. And, they ask the question, and I've taken to asking the same question, when is enough enough? That simply we can't pack more and more and more all the time, or we're eroding the very qualities that not only our visitors come here for, but what many of us are here for. And sometimes there are unintended consequences of marketing. I'm glad Jonathan showed the video, because that video is, sure, it's a great advertisement for visitors to come and experience a bit of this lifestyle, but it's also marketing the lifestyle itself and, living free and living wild. Part of the problem is there are more of us here all the time, and we all enjoy the same things. And so, it's hard for, say, the Travel and Tourism Board. They're tasked with bringing visitors. A byproduct of that is going to be more people saying, I want to live there too. And that's where the burden falls on us as local government. And it's becoming harder all the time to keep pace with the impacts of growth. So anyhow, thank you. Thanks for listening.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Anna Olson, President and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce. And thanks, Jim, for eloquently speaking. I didn't bring a timer. Can you put the timer on for me? I have a few thoughts around the lodging tax and wanted to share them today. We are, the Chamber of Commerce is here as a large membership organization in the town of Jackson. We have 900 business members. We are here to meet a number of goals in our mission, and it is essentially, we believe a vibrant economy is really the heart of a successful community. Many of you have your own businesses or work for other people, or maybe you're retired, but at some point in life, business has really been the core of a lot of what you've done. And the Chamber, along with that, just like Jim said at the government, our role is to balance that vibrant economy with a really, treasure the environment and understand our community and value the residents who live here. So with that in mind, why is the Chamber of Commerce standing up here? It's really just to point out some of the facts around the lodging tax. And I'm going to take the 10 minutes and actually just go into that. On your tables, you'll see there's something called the Jackson Hole Travel and Tourism Board report. It's the annual audit. The numbers that I'm going to quote you in here are all in there if you'd like to take a copy at the end, just as a follow-up. So I think there's just a couple of things that I'd love you to learn today. Obviously, the lodging tax is paid for by the visitor. It is 2% on every hotel short-term stay in Teton County. That visitor is paying to offset or mitigate the impact of their visit to our valley. It's as simple as that. The lodging tax is paid for by the visitor, paid for and generates, and I'll get into the figures here, 6 million last year, 6.2 million in lodging tax, and generates a large amount of funding for our town and county government that otherwise we will pay. Also, where Jim is accurate, that the 40% and the 60% split that is in the statute, what I would counter today is when you look at the details, about 75% of the lodging tax collected is actually spent here. And we do manage how that money is spent. So this sense that 60% goes on promotion, I'd just like to give you a little bit of insight into exactly that, how that is spent. Because when I find that I do explain that, then people can have a stronger set of tools to evaluate the value of the lodging tax itself. So paid for by itself. So what does the 40% do? It goes straight to town and county. Thanks to Clarine Law and others in 2010, the statute was changed for Teton County, the only county in the state that collects over $1.5 million in visitor tax. Because of that, we are allowed to put 40% straight into mitigation, straight into town and county. How do they spend that? They spend that on safety, fire EMS. They spend that on mass transportation. They spend, which mainly is START, to sort of translate that. They spend it on parks and rec. They spend it on pathways. These are all elements that our community strongly values. Of course we do. We have government. That's what it does, and it does it well. Thank you, Jim. So, and others. And we do pay into, the visitor pays into mitigating what is going on. But in reality, I think it was pointed out actually in an email that came out recently, you know, the visitors are using the pathways. They are using the parks. Some of them are riding the bus, particularly in the winter, and I'll get onto that. And but hopefully they're not using fire EMS. Generally we are. So what it's doing is it's paying $2.4 million straight off the bat, that was last year, into covering expenses that town and county will have to pay if we choose not to support the lodging tax. That is fact. So then you move into the 60% world. The 60% world is often where people get a little lost. So I'm just going to take a minute to explain where that goes. Because on the statute, it actually says 60% to be used for promotion and other tourism things. I'll translate it that way. Other objectives around tourism. In history, so since 2010, the 60% has actually been spent, the majority of it, not on direct promotion, not on the things that you just saw. It was an excellent execution of spending money, and I admire the TTB for getting together a great campaign this winter and stay wild. But actually, if you look at that total pot of 6.2 million, about 75% of that stays paid in our valley. It is not going to agencies to buy ads to promote. And I'm just going to run through really where that goes. So if you look at the 60%, it correlates to about 4.2 million last year. 20% of that goes on to community events. Community events. We value those. Over 60 nonprofits and businesses have received $3.5 million in the last 7 years to pay for events that the majority we go to, we support, and we value in our community. There is a question Jonathan's going to ask us, who does this benefit? And I'm actually, if there's time, going to list you those 50 nonprofits. I can guarantee you every single person in this room has made a donation to one of them, or received them, or attached to them. And that is what 20% of that 60% goes to straight away. 17% goes to the Chamber of Commerce. Now you've connected why I'm here. And that goes directly into visitor services. And I'm going to just explain for a second why that is so important. I actually talk about this being mitigation. When the Chamber of Commerce, which, by the way, we operate 4 visitor service centers now in Jackson, when the visitor picks up the phone and calls and says, shall I come to Jackson Hole? What shall I do there in the summer? Guess what the first thing our guys say? How about coming in October? It's a really great time to come here. We are there to educate the visitor. And the same goes true in the visitor centers. Hey, what shall I do today? It's, July. I'm here. I've got my family. We're in the RV. Well, I wouldn't suggest you drive down the Moose Wilson Road. I would suggest you go and do something else. We are there to mitigate and impact what those tourists are doing. We saw 500,000 people last year. So I would say 17% of that money, that 16%, is going straight into helping mitigate the impact of tourism. Then we move on. Then you get to the biggest chunk, which is 37%, which goes to direct marketing. Of that, 37% of the 60%, you still with me? It's about 1.23 million. 1 million goes to winter, about 300,000 goes to fall and spring. And here's the deal. We do control it. When Clary Law got the law changed, locally we said, we don't want any more promotion in summer. Absolutely no money is spent on promoting summer. 0. That was decided locally. Then we decided not only were we not going to spend anything on summer, we were going to spend that 60% on other things. And it was a good decision. things like the visitor centers, things like community events, things like local PR companies. These are businesses that are owned and operated by your friends and neighbors. They are receiving funds to operate. And then when it comes to the actual marketing, I would just want to tell you for a minute a couple of things that I can say. 2 minutes. Okay. Thank you, Jonathan. In the winter, we have a very specific marketing plan. Some of you may know I actually spent the last 20 years marketing Jackson Hole at Jackson Hole Mountain Resort. So my experience in this is pretty deep. But what I want to tell you is the marketing that is being spent is truly targeted to low season and alternative things to do. And I mean this truly. When we use the Air Credit Program, which you'll see is another 10% of that promotion, we are using it with a public-private partnership to bring people in early December and in January when we have low season. We're running less than 50% occupancy in hotels. And I just want to break down that myth that enough is enough. In the fall and the spring, when I talk to our members, we're running 20% occupancy in our hotels. 20%. We are running 50% in our hotels in the winter. We are not driving. We are filling in to have a year-round economy so that employers can keep employees year-round and so they don't have to go through April and May and November and December wondering how they're going to pay their bills. Yes, we have a very, very challenging 3 months in the summer for infrastructure, for product delivery. It's growing. Whatever, everybody learned that this morning. There's no surprises there. The lodging tax pays to mitigate. If we choose not to collect it, we are giving up $6 million plus, probably $7 million next year. 40% goes straight to our town and county, and the other is driving business in the off-season or being paid locally for things we value. Jonathan just told me to stop.
Impeccable timing, Anna. Will, you got the mics somewhere? So we'll go to questions in just a second, but I'm going to start with, so if you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll bring the mics to you. But I will start with questions, one for each of you, and they are concerns that I've been hearing. And Jim, the question for you is, if we don't have the lodging tax, then how will local government replace the revenues that it currently takes in for them? And Anna, the question for you is the corporate welfare question, is why should we be using public money to subsidize private business?
Thanks, Jonathan. Good question. Government funding is complicated, and in a nutshell, the lodging tax is, in fact, an important source of revenue for the town and county. On the town side, we expect to receive roughly $800,000 or $900,000 this year. We will put that to a wide array of visitor services. It's commonly there's a lot of marketing done saying that the lodging tax supports fire EMS, and START, and Pathways. The reality is it is a source of revenue, comes into our general fund, and we spend millions on visitor services. So it helps, but it is not the sole source of funding for those items or services, even though people often cite it that way. It's a way of tracking how you're spending the money, and it's significant. It's and it's important to ask this question. That's the next discussion. Really, as elected officials, I feel we're going to have to listen to the community. The election on the lodging tax, we'll hear, people can come, make their voices heard, and then we can react to it. And if people say we're tired of promotion, or we feel like we're being over promoted here, then the next conversation is, okay, well, let's talk about revenue. And it is going to be an interesting conversation. On the town side, we get about $800,000 or $900,000 from the dollars from the lodging tax. We're going to have to, maybe tighten up our budgeting. Maybe we don't put as much into reserves. Maybe we have to be more reliant on forecasting a greater growth in sales tax. So there are things we can do to soften the blow right off the top, but we're still looking at the bottom line of trying to replace $500,000 or $600,000 of revenue. Now we may look at some cuts in service. We may look at all other ways to generate revenue. As I referenced earlier, I thought it was a more effective way to fund our government if we just had a 6 cent of sales tax go directly to the town and county. The way we do now, just not devoted to specific projects. That could be one path. All kinds, an array of options have been proposed. Fees on short-term rentals outside of, say, the Teton Village Resort District where they are currently collected. Fees on rental cars. Some of these face legal impediments. Some of them may not be very popular. Property tax. I'm not endorsing any one of these ideas. It's a conversation we're all going to have as town and county should the community decide to go in a different direction. And that's one that people should be realistic about if they're opposed to the tax. They're going to have to come to the table and have these conversations because maybe we need to focus on ways to pay for these services ourselves where we have greater control over the revenue.
So Jonathan's referring to that the Travel and Tourism Board has campaigns for the winter and has historically used the brand recognition around Jackson Hole. And I have obviously watched this from my other side, and I would say that I think it is a very good tactic for the campaign to use a globally recognized brand. $1 million. I sound like that guy in that movie, don't I? $1 million is not a very large marketing campaign. When you talk about the competition that Jackson Hole is against, Vail Resorts, Aspen KSL, and other global destinations in the winter, we really have an incredibly competitive marketplace. Luckily, we're still independently owned. Luckily, we have large corporations that do very effective marketing campaigns and have done for many years for our destination. The Travel and Tourism Board has actually, if Jonathan reversed that and replayed that video and I said to you, count how many times skiing is shown, you might get to 4. What they've done is taken a globally recognized brand and represented our destination, all the other things that there are to do, Nordic, snowmobiling, elk refuge, and all these other, family market, and basically leveraged their 1 million very effectively. As I mentioned before, we have 900 members in our organization. Most of them are small businesses. 80% have 10 or less people in them. I would say that all of those businesses are benefiting from that use, and that's exactly how public money should be spent.
We'll go to your questions. Please, short, please, questions. Please, not statements or advocacy. Thank you.
This is for Jim. So if we were to somehow loosen the terms of the lodging tax, what are our chances in the state capitol getting that done? It seems that we often go as Teton County to the state and say, hey, we're different. Can you change something to benefit us? And there's a knee-jerk reaction of, oh, no, not you again.
Thank you. Good question. As bad as I am at prognosticating how local tax elections will turn out, I'm probably even worse at prognosticating how things are going to shake out in today's Wyoming legislature. That's not a knock on our local legislators. They're going to go to bat for us, and I don't know. It's an interesting time. It's kind of tempestuous, as Jonathan has made the theme here. There are a lot of issues being kicked around, and if we were to change the formula, I mean, times have changed since the 1990s. You know, when this was initially passed and then alterations were made. You don't have to do quite as much promotion, perhaps, anymore as you did back then. Now this place is very well known, and I think other communities around the state that are also very desirable places to live and to visit, they might learn from our example and say, wow, you guys are being overwhelmed. You're strained to provide the services that your visitors are in need of. And so maybe we can work with some of these other communities to say, let's flip that around. Maybe 60% could be spent on offsetting visitor impacts, maybe 70%, maybe 100%. And that's one of the ideas that is being proposed, and that the state would do its own promotion. I might be able to support that. I'm doing my best to try to keep an open mind and let our legislators do their best. And I forgot in the funding options, a lot are real estate transfer tax. We've had people in our community and our representatives in Cheyenne putting a lot of thought into that. And I don't want to, I'm certainly not holding my breath, but I don't want to close the book on that potential opportunity as well.
Well, I think I would just say that this year has not been the year to go down there, and if we want to have a seat at the table to negotiate, then we'd need a lodging tax. So I go back to our community and say, if you want to tinker under the hood, which the chamber is also open to, and how it is spent, but we need to keep the lodging tax. Why give up what the tourists pay us and we benefit from? So in the meantime, let's move forward with that and work on, if we decide that we want to. An example Jim and I agreed on was this sustainable destination plan that came in front of the gym this week. There are definitely things that our community, I'm sure, can get behind. But I'm going to reiterate, so Jonathan's going to tell me off. But the 60% is not all spent on promotion. It is spent on things that we have chosen to value: events, visitor services, and other mitigation.
I'm not real confident in this, but I believe that I read in the last year that the Wyoming Supreme Court disallowed some of the spending that had taken place from the 60% on some concert. Now, correct me if I'm incorrect in my memory, but if that's the case, how does that impact going forward if we're being limited in how we spend that 60%?
I think you're referring to an attorney general opinion that was solicited and provided to the Travel and Tourism Board. It's not a court ruling. It's not binding, as far as I know. Some folks might say that should guide our strategy. Really, I think this is another thing that we're in, and I, of course, would agree that our community should have some leeway in defining promotion more generously or more creatively. Mayor Barron's in the room here, and as he and I have often joked over the years, we used some of the promotional money years ago to help plow the roads of Yellowstone when Yellowstone couldn't get open in time. And so to me, the language in the state statute that allows for other tourism-related objectives is broad enough to drive a Yellowstone snowplow through. I think we would agree. We can have some creativity as a community in defining promotion, and like Anna said, there's a true commitment here all around to trying to spend the money in a way that benefits our community. We're a little bit hamstrung by the statute, but once you get beyond our group of 10 elected officials, then it gets into how the state, it's state politics, and that's where some of these changes are being contemplated.
Yeah, I think Kate was asking how is the appointed board of 7 to whom are they responsible and how are they making their decisions is essentially, I think, Kate's question. So they are responsible. They are appointed by the joint town and county officials, and just like other public boards, people nominate themselves and they get elected based on their. In this statute, it actually also includes that there needs to be a balance between tourism-related business people and others. And it's essentially, they're in a retreat now. It's a public meeting. There is a liaison, just like all other public boards from the town and county. And effectively, they have been looking at their budget, I think, to see how effective it's been. And the consensus that I'm hearing is a lot of things are working. even though the AG ruling did change some of the ways that community events could apply and what that money could be spent on, they're still spending about 20% on events. They're still going to be doing the contracts for the visitor services. They will still have this opportunity to specifically promote fall, winter, and spring. And how do you measure that? I don't think the town and county are looking at the statistics of measurement. That's not really your role. But how do they measure it? They look at things like if we're increasing winter or increasing spring and fall, then how is that being effective? And so essentially there are a number of different ways that they are being measured. And I think public involvement and the town and county has been pretty robust.
My question is about whether this tourism issue is kind of a red herring in terms of what everybody's up in arms about is our housing and traffic issue. I guess as I look around and drive around and see nothing but 22 plates, 23 plates, and Idaho plates causing traffic, I'm just wondering what the statistics are. Maybe, Jonathan, you have these numbers more than anyone else. Like, what is the actual growth over the last 10 years in visitors to Jackson Hole, particularly in the seasons that we're promoting, compared to, if I was going to throw something under the bus, the impact of second home ownership. I look out at East Jackson and I'm like, whoa, where's anybody going to live? And is that impact so exponentially larger than the impacts of slight increase in tourism numbers that it's almost not that, it's not that significant whether we were to impact that tourism number or not?
Well, you're right, Corey. I mean, I think they are intertwined. It's not just simply straight visitation, but you do have more and more people moving here, as Jonathan has documented in his columns, that Wyoming's status as a tax haven brings more and more people here, brings them here to buy property and declare residency. So I think some of the metrics you might be looking for, if you go to jacksontetonplan.com, that's where our joint planning department puts the indicator report, and you can track our effective population for by season. And there has been some significant growth in year-round effective population, especially during the wintertime. So you could look at that. Job growth by far is the fast. It's outpacing any other growth in our county. That's one of the main takeaways. And you can look at those statistics there. That'd be my best suggestion. It's hard to quantify, but I think all of us, from our experiences, can relate to what you've been describing.
Things, because I think statistics do back up what you're saying. And I just want to let you know, the theory behind winter and the off season makes a lot of sense when you actually know the volume of what we're dealing with. You heard figures this morning, 3.3 million visiting in the summer. In the winter, we have approximately 150,000 visitors, 150,000 versus 3.3 million in the summer. In the spring and fall, it's way less than that. In the winter, the average visitor is spending about $388 a day. They're staying 4 to 5 days. They're making a large contribution to not only our lodging tax, but our sales tax. So not only are they driving year-round economy, they're really, really helping that sales tax, which 60% of the government general fund comes from. It's paid for by tourists. So in the winter, 150,000, each of them paying about $388 a day. These stats come from the airport. In the summer, the airport visitor is dropping about $250 a day. The driving visitor is dropping a lot less. So to invest in a visitor that's coming for 5 days, spending 50% more than the summer visitor, and really not creating any infrastructure challenges. They don't rent cars, they get on the bus, or they just stay in one or the other and use the shuttles. So that's where investing in the winter is really not creating and continuing these infrastructure challenges. It's just balancing out that year-round economy that our small businesses are looking for.
Also, Corey, like when I say that the lines are being blurred, as Jonathan has documented, our economy has changed. More people can work from here than ever before. They're not working just in tourism. And so that's part of the pressure that we're facing. And the line between who is a resident and who is a tourist, it used to be years ago, they came, they left, they spent their money and they left. Now people are back and they're keeping 1 foot here and 1 foot in San Francisco or Austin or elsewhere. And when we're promoting live wild and live free, again, it's the lifestyle. It's not just come here and visit and then go back to the city.
That's a perfect segue. I'm Lori Iverson. I'm a Midwest dairy farmer with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I just wanted to ask briefly about the name of the campaign and the marketing strategy, Stay Wild. And Jim, that was a great segue. I agree with Anna. The film shows a wide variety of recreational opportunities. Are there opportunities and efforts to broaden that messaging to encourage our visitors to travel lightly on the landscape during their recreational pursuits to minimize impacts to habitat and wildlife?
Yes, Laurie, and I can give you specific examples. We are collaborating, obviously, with yourselves and other conservation and federal landowners. We take education seriously. We've given a number of pages in our Explorer Visitor Guide over to that, how to be a good visitor. The visitor service agents that cooperate in the North Teton, Cache Visitor Center and in the home ranch, that's exactly what we're telling the guest, how to be a better visitor. And one other thing I just wanted to add on the campaign, seeing as it was brought up, the TTB has made a really concerted effort, again, to reach out to nonprofits in our area who are in the conservation world and see if they can highlight what they're trying to do and educate the guests before they come here. The winter visitor is an educated guest, and they generally want to learn more. Just to round up, Jim's piece around, the visitor comes and the visitor goes. That's the definition of a visitor. What we are seeing is our winter visitor does not come back in the summer, and I'll also be putting out some figures. Only 3% of the visitors who came last summer at the airport had ever been here in the winter. These are two very different beasts, summer and winter. And so I just wanted to add that piece.
Thanks, Lori. I concur, and I also concur with a lot of what Anna said at the beginning there. The Chamber has been a great partner in helping us deal with the impacts of visitors and to try to chart a path forward toward a more sustainable tourism plan. The Travel and Tourism Board has a kind of a broad mandate, but one part of it is that they're supposed to be using their promotional funds toward fostering stewardship and sustainability. And that gets to the very heart of your question. And I know Anna is interested in moving in that path, in that direction. People are working on it. To date, we haven't made quite as much progress on that front as I would have liked.
Okay, and with that, we're just about out of time. So Anna, if you want to take a minute and give a final word, and then Jim, and then we'll call it a session.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I hope it's been interesting. And if you have any more questions, always be in touch. The lodging tax is paid for by the visitor. It predominantly does stay in our valley. The question on the table is, why wouldn't we tax the visitor? The visitor is a great group of people. They come, they go. The data is right there. We are very much a bucket list destination. And we should take advantage of that a little bit and use them to help save the community from spending money on that, and also enjoying all the things that it does bring to us that we value in our community. And I hope that you'll see that that is the overriding reason to support it when it comes up.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Jonathan. First off, I work in tourism 25 and a half years after moving to Jackson Hole. I'm still working in tourism, and I'm proud of that, and it's great. I support our tourism industry here, and I think it's our heritage, and it's something that will continue to be a big part of our economy in the future. Like me, this fellow who wrote this book, it's called Diary of a Dude Wrangler, Struthers Burt, he was a pioneer of tourism in Jackson Hole. He started the Barbie Sea Ranch along with Dr. Horace Carncross in 1912, the third dude ranch in Jackson Hole. My final word is going to be not from me, but from Struthers Burt. He wrote this book in 1922, and he never really got into talking about his ranch or promoting it. He kind of talked about what he called the Jackson Hole country as a whole. And so when he talks about my country, he's talking about Jackson Hole. And even then, 100 years ago, they were having debates around the campfire as to whether the Old West was dead. Struthers Burt writes, "I have said that the Old West is still there, and so it is. And I have said that in many places it will continue to exist, and that is true also. But I am afraid for my own country unless some help is given it, some wise direction. It is too beautiful and now too famous. Sometimes I dream of it unhappily." And to me, I think some of the wisdom from 100 years ago still rings as true as ever. I can't help but getting away. I feel the same way myself.
Thank you very much to both of you.